The Man at the Window. I lived in a little town for many years, a normal life, as they say. School, a job, and a lot of time to dedicate to myself, my interests, my passions, and enjoyments. I saw the world through a window, like a film full of images, some sad, others joyful, without it making too much impression on me, as though what was happening around me was just the inevitable scenario of life going by. From my window I looked at other people's lives and saw them as though they were a frame around mine. Let's say I was too busy living my life to bother about that of others. But I realized something was wrong, and that is why I was not indifferent when some protesters passed under my window, or when some event in my little town disturbed the monotony of my days. Moreover, this curiosity and the attraction that I felt towards those who wanted to change the scenery of everyday life pushed me into looking for these people, listening to them, and sharing experiences with them. In the end, I realized that I must do something to prevent the wretchedness I observed from my window from entering my life irremediably. So I engaged myself along with those I had met, so that the scenery around us became an adventure worth living together, without laws, privilege, and privileged people. I started dealing with all kinds of problems and subjects along with the others, who were certainly only a few compared to the population of my town, and we tried to find concrete solutions that erupted into daily life along with our discussions and proposals. We gathered and spread information, mainly concerning the most hidden and slyest aspects upon which the collective wretchedness imposed on us was based. We demonstrated in the streets and clashed with those who wanted to prevent us from doing so. We tried to oppose any kind of abuse, or at least we made it clear that not everybody would passively accept what power wanted to impose. We had very modest means, perhaps, but we were armed with our tenacious desires and the firm conviction that something, even if only in our little town, would never be as before or as authority had planned. We shared enthusiasm, ideas, and practices for quite a long time, which also gave me the possibility to widen my horizons far beyond the limits of my little town, and to meet people in situations similar to those I was experiencing. I realized that big experiences are no more than the sum of the little everyday ones. Little rebellions gain strength and courage from the bigger ones and give consistency, concreteness, and reality to the latter. Then, step by step, the mosaic started to fall apart, and we began to take a distance from one another. Some also took a distance from themselves, as they were anxious to find a decent place in the world, which, in spite of our efforts, was not changing. The situation was collapsing all around us. On the one hand, there was the most determined opposition to our demands. On the other, there was an unscrupulous use of our actions and ideas that were now being used to renew the wretchedness, to perfect and reproduce it for future generations. We were offered the opportunity to play an active role in this process of developing the existent, i.e., the moderate voice of dissent, and not a few of us accepted it. Of course, they were not the first to go over to the other side, nor were they the last. It is well known that power and the crumbs it can distribute are attractive to those willing to climb the ladder of success, or who simply never really believed in the dreams they used to boast about. We remained very few, the strong and clean ones. In the long run, we were not so strong, and we were no longer clean. On the contrary, we were dirty, with impotence, regret, the lack of horizons to exhilarate us. Dirty with sad and bad drinking, with human miseries great and small. Someone's body and brain went off with the help of psychoactive mixtures, before they fell into the abyss of doubt and desperation, far from the thrill of freedom that once touched them. For the few who remained, the techniques of dissuasion employed by the guardians of order lost both the formalities of the right and the tricks of the cultural democratic theater. As long as juvenile exuberance was recuperated into quieter spheres of opinion, those who were still on the road of rebellion were simply seen as a question of public safety, a threat to the tranquility of the little town. Greater power was therefore given to the repressors in order to persecute them. What was left of our hopes and projects that we thought would illuminate the future? I could have gone back to my window, waiting for unforeseen events to change the situation. But something still stirred out there, and it was worth moving, even close to my town, to try to open up a glimmer of hope in the darkness that was enveloping me day after day. So I went away in search of the enthusiasm and engagement that were sadly disappearing around me. In the long run, however, I realized that my expectations concerning the destruction of the existent were not felt with the same passion by those around me. Many of them were happy with a few words, with their sphere of relations that gave them an illusion against the alienating and devastated society. As a consequence, even if ideas, attitudes, and practices were still there, the projects and initiatives that were carried out didn't really try to subvert daily life. I came back to my window and, scouring the horizon, looking for a new spur, a tiny signal to start again. But most of the time the color I saw on the street was that of the uniforms coming to exact their retortion. Meantime, I carried on with my small actions, trying to convince myself that my sensitivity and hope weren't clouded by the darkness of my town. In fact, it was a demonstration of resistance, and the proof that things can be done, even if many didn't go any further than that. But in spite of all the messages I spread in the wind, my own voice was the only echo. It was quite an absurd situation. I was looking for paths to share with others, even if it implied adapting my attention and skills to those of others. In the end, there was no answer, only frustration, as I had reduced my aspirations to a dimension that was not mine. What was I turning into? Maybe a priest looking for good souls, or rather a ghost or shadow that runs up against the wall with others not wanting to come near it. And if I were really resentful, I would say I had turned into a plague victim who brought bad luck, as I was a sworn enemy of order. After all, the forces of repression concentrate their efforts on the few who don't give up, given that they don't have many other objectives left. I made a decision. I wouldn't accept the inevitable fact that I was being spied upon, nor would I measure my aspirations and actions according to what the imposed conditions established. Control and coercion disturb our life enough. I found it unacceptable to become my own controller. So I decided not to let myself be tracked down any longer. I decided that my time, space, and experiences didn't deserve to become fodder for my enemy's appetite. When I made this choice, I knew it was an adventure that would not necessarily be final, but which could put me in some new, unique, and immutable condition in which to nourish my desires and activities. I rather found myself in a parallel dimension that allowed me to look for the completeness and freedom of movement that I lacked. Other places, other instruments, and other conditions to keep on stressing the ideas that had marked my life for a long time. Sometimes I come back to the window, but I know that my view is going to reach wider horizons than those that I saw in the beginning.